She was detained on the street in her new car, treated like a criminal simply due to her skin color. The officer hurled accusations until her father, an FBI captain, intervened, revealing the truth. This was just the start of a scandal that would rock the entire city. The summer evening draped the city in a soft golden light as the last rays of sun brushed over buildings, casting long, warm shadows. The air was thick with the smell of fresh leaves and a hint of city smog, creating that familiar blend of nature and concrete that made Kayla Hughes feel alive. She stood next to her car, a sleek luxury model gifted to her by her father, the polished metal gleaming in the fading sunlight. A young black woman with a head of vibrant curly hair, Kayla exuded confidence and joy as she held the keys in her hand, the world feeling limitless. This car was more than just a gift. It was a milestone, a tangible reward for her hard work, and a symbol of her independence. She wore simple, slightly worn jeans and a light t-shirt, unassuming but perfect for a summer night out. Her face shone with happiness, her dark eyes sparkling with anticipation. She pictured herself driving through the city streets, perhaps catching a few admiring glances, reveling in the feeling of freedom. This was her time to celebrate, her chance to experience the world on her terms. Sliding into the driver's seat, she started the engine, savoring the smooth hum that seemed to promise endless adventures. As she eased the car into gear and pulled onto the road, a smile spread across her face. Everything felt right. She stopped at a red light, taking in the city around her. The neon signs beginning to flicker on, the gentle buzz of people and nightlife awakening. But then, in her rearview mirror, she noticed the unmistakable flash of police lights. At first she brushed it off, assuming they were just passing by. Yet, as she drove forward, the lights followed, a siren blaring, breaking the peace of the evening. Her heart skipped a beat. Why would they be following her? She hadn't done anything wrong. Pulling over, Kayla took a deep breath, her heartbeat quickening as anxiety crept in. A large, imposing officer stepped out of the police car, his face etched with a severe, almost hostile expression. He approached her window with a cold, scrutinizing gaze that felt more like a judgment than an inquiry. His presence was unnervingly stern, every step exuding authority and accusation. "From this moment, your rights are suspended," he stated in a tone that was both mocking and final. The words struck her like a blow, dismantling the pride she had felt only moments earlier. She was baffled, trying to understand what she could have done to prompt such treatment. Yet the officer offered no clarity, only commands. He ordered her to exit the vehicle, each instruction stripping away her sense of agency. Reluctantly, Kayla opened the door and stepped out, feeling exposed as she faced him under the dim glow of streetlights. By now, a small crowd had gathered, curious faces peeking from windows, others forming a circle around the scene. Some held up their phones, recording the encounter, while hushed conversations carried an edge of judgment, their gazes sizing her up as if she were guilty by default. Her pride and excitement from earlier dissolved into a stinging sense of shame and fear, leaving her feeling like an unwilling spectacle. With every word from the officer, with every scrutinizing look from the crowd, Kayla felt the reality of injustice weigh down on her. She was acutely aware that any reaction, even a slight sign of defiance, could be twisted against her. Holding back tears, she steadied herself, attempting to project calm despite the turmoil within. But the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of fear in her eyes, revealed the depth of her distress. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This moment, she realized, was something much larger, something that seemed to echo with the pain of countless injustices before her. And as she stood there, facing the officer and the crowd, she knew that her life had suddenly and irrevocably changed. Officer Mike Ridge seemed to relish the power he held as he began searching Kayla's car, ignoring her words. She tried to explain that it was her car, that the papers were in the glove box, but each word she spoke was met with the cold, contemptuous look on Ridge's face. His actions were rough and merciless. He was turning her things upside down, as if he was sure he would find something incriminating. Finally, with an air of absolute confidence, he declared he suspected her of theft, claiming she had no proof of ownership. His words tore at her heart, making her feel like an outsider, a criminal in her own space. She tried to argue, but Ridge just threw her a quick, humiliating glance, as if her words held no worth. When Kayla tried to explain again, Ridge mockingly grabbed her wrist and quickly snapped handcuffs on her, giving her no chance to defend herself. The cold metal was a painful reminder of her helplessness, and the officer's face showed nothing but indifference, with perhaps even a hint of satisfaction. A crowd of onlookers had gathered around. Some were watching with interest, others were openly filming on their phones. Kayla heard people whispering, speculating about her guilt without knowing the full story. She felt like she was on display, a spectacle for strangers' curious eyes. Holding back tears of humiliation, Kayla said her father was an FBI captain who could vouch for her and more, who could prove that the car was hers. But Ridge only smirked and replied with sarcastic venom, Sure, and I'm the president." Those words, dripping with mockery, were the last straw. She felt all her confidence drain away in an instant, her hopes crumbling. It seemed that all she could do was accept her fate, go to the station, and perhaps face even more humiliation. But before Ridge could take her away, Kayla quickly took out her phone and managed to send her father a short message. Help! She knew she didn't have much time and hoped her father would see her plea and intervene. When Daniel Hughes, an FBI captain, received his daughter's alarming message, he didn't hesitate. He dropped everything and headed straight to the scene. His heart was pounding with anger and worry. He couldn't believe his daughter could face such biased treatment. Arriving at the location, he immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Kayla, handcuffed, was standing on the curb, surrounded by onlookers. The fear and humiliation in her eyes only strengthened his resolve to seek justice. Approaching Officer Ridge, Daniel wasted no words. His voice was firm and authoritative. "Remove those handcuffs from her immediately." Ridge, initially puzzled, quickly realized who he was dealing with. The confusion on his face turned to fear, but he still tried to keep his composure. "On what grounds did you detain my daughter?" Daniel demanded, his gaze drilling into Ridge. The officer, visibly shaken, mumbled something about a suspicion of theft, but his words sounded increasingly unconvincing. Daniel Hughes was familiar with bias and knew how to fight it, but at that moment, a father's fury overpowered his professional restraint. He demanded an explanation, knowing that Ridge had no lawful grounds for the arrest. At that moment, the officer began to realize his actions were not only baseless, but could jeopardize his career. He looked around and noticed some of the bystanders recording the incident on their phones. The realization that his actions were caught on camera sent a chill down his spine. This footage could destroy his reputation and threaten his position in the police force. Ridge attempted to justify himself, mentioning his suspicions, but each of his arguments grew weaker under the FBI captain's piercing gaze. The gathered crowd watched the scene with bated breath, realizing they were witnessing something far more significant than just a roadside confrontation. The tension in the air intensified as Daniel, with cold determination, declared, "This is a blatant violation of my daughter's rights. You will be held accountable for this behavior." Seeing no way out, Ridge reluctantly removed the handcuffs from Kayla. The incident involving Kayla quickly became a public topic of discussion. News outlets reported the incident, and social media exploded with outraged comments and posts supporting Kayla and her father. People across the country expressed their anger over the unfair treatment and bias Kayla had faced. Her father, Captain Daniel Hughes, became a symbol of the fight for equality and against racial discrimination, making him a highly respected figure within the community. Officer Mike Ridge was soon suspended. His superiors decided to send him to training on cultural and racial sensitivity to prevent similar incidents in the future. This decision set a precedent and served as a message to the entire police department, signaling that such actions would not go unpunished. For Kayla, the experience was a bitter but important lesson. Despite all her family's achievements, the respect and status they had earned over the years, prejudice against her still remained a reality she had to face. This reminder was painful, but it didn't break her spirit. She didn't feel defeated. On the contrary, the incident strengthened her resolve to continue the fight for justice. Along with her father, Kayla decided to push for change, ensuring that cases like hers wouldn't happen again. They launched an initiative to create educational programs for police officers to help dispel biases and improve relations between the police and the community. Kayla wanted every person, regardless of skin color, to feel safe and confident walking the streets of their city.